The tires crunched over the gravel driveway as we pulled up to the beach house, the late afternoon sun slanting golden over the dunes. Salt hung in the air like an old memory, clinging to my skin the moment I stepped out of the car. On paper, this weekend was supposed to be a getaway, a chance to relax by the ocean, maybe rekindle something that had been quietly slipping through my fingers for months. In reality, it already felt like a performance neither of us had rehearsed for. The house itself was beautiful. 2 stories of whitewashed wood and wide glass windows, perched like it had been grown right out of the sand. The rhythmic crash of waves was close enough to feel in my chest, a steady pulse under everything. I wanted to feel at home here. I wanted to feel at home with her again. Her sister, Lily, was already on the porch when we arrived. She waved enthusiastically, bounding down the steps barefoot, the hem of her sundress swaying in the breeze. She smelled faintly of coconut and sea air when she hugged me, her arms tight and warm. It was the kind of hug that makes you feel remembered. "Glad you finally made it," she said, grinning up at me. "Traffic bad?" "Not too bad," I answered. My voice sounded casual, but the truth was I hadn't spoken much on the drive. Most of the conversation had been swallowed by the low hum of the radio and my wife's scrolling thumb as she stared into her phone. Speaking of which, while Lily was still holding me in that brief, friendly embrace, my wife, Claire, barely looked up. She was leaning against the passenger door, tapping at her screen with an expression that was more engaged than anything she'd shown me all week. "Hey, Lil," she murmured, not moving from her spot. It wasn't that she was outright cold. It was worse. It was the kind of distracted, unbothered energy that makes you feel invisible. I had been trying for months to bridge the distance. Dinners out, small surprises, quiet invitations for a walk after work. Most ended in polite excuses or a promise to do it another night. Somehow, I convinced myself this weekend might be different. Lily grabbed one of our bags from the trunk before I could stop her. "Come on in. Mom had the place stocked. There's wine, snacks, everything. You can unpack later." Inside, the house was a picture from a magazine. Pale hardwood floors, wicker furniture with soft white cushions, wide open space that smelled faintly of sunscreen and something citrusy. Through the back sliding doors, the ocean glittered under a strip of orange sky. Claire breezed past me without touching me, heading straight for the couch, phone still in hand. "Wi-Fi password," she asked Lily, her eyes never leaving the screen. Lily rattled it off, then turned back to me with a small shrug, like she'd noticed too, but wasn't going to say anything yet. I carried our bags upstairs to the guest room. The bed was big, with soft linen sheets and a perfect view of the shoreline. For a moment, I stood by the window and just watched the surf break over and over, each wave erasing itself in the sand like it had never existed. That kind of impermanence felt too familiar. When I came back down, Lily was in the kitchen pouring glasses of something cold. She handed me one and smiled. "You look like you could use this." "Thanks." The glass was sweating in my hand, condensation dripping down onto my wrist. Claire was curled in the corner of the couch now, her legs tucked under her, still scrolling. I sat in the armchair opposite her, sipping my drink, wondering if she even realized how far apart we felt sitting in the same room. Lily leaned against the counter, chatting about the weather, the best local spots to grab fresh seafood, the tide schedule for tomorrow. Her voice was warm, easy. She asked me about work, what projects I had going, whether I still did those weekend photography trips she remembered from years ago. I felt my shoulders loosen slightly under her attention, because it was the first time all day someone had looked me in the eye and actually wanted to hear the answer. When I glanced back at Claire, she was smiling, but not at me. Something on her phone had her attention, her fingers moving fast over the glass. That was when it hit me. This weekend might not just be the same as the last few months. It might be worse. Morning found me awake before the gulls. The house moaned softly around us, with settling, pipes ticking, the ocean's steady breath pushing through the screens. I rolled toward Claire, hoping the nearness might remind her of the way we used to fit. She turned at the same moment, only to reach for her phone on the nightstand. A spray of cold light washed her face as she unlocked it, and I felt ridiculous, like a dog that had leaned in for a pat and found the hand occupied. "Sleep okay?" I asked. "Fine." Her voice was neutral, like a room with all the furniture removed. She stretched, beautiful, infuriatingly, and for a second I thought she might fold into me. Instead, she slid out of bed and padded to the bathroom, closing the door on my reply. I lay there listening to the shower and the purr of the fan, letting a string of remembered intimacies tug through me. There'd been a time when bathrooms were invitations, steam, giggles, the playful shove of a foot when I tried to join her. Lately, the door felt like a border checkpoint. No entry, insufficient documentation of affection. Downstairs, Lily moved around the kitchen with the relaxed rhythm of someone at home. She had music playing low, an old soul track that made the room feel warm before the sun fully arrived. She wore a soft t-shirt knotted at the waist and a pair of shorts the color of wet sand. When she saw me, her face lit. "There you are. Coffee or tea?" "Coffee, please," I said, grateful for the ordinary kindness of being offered anything. She poured and slid the mug into my hand without the slightest clatter, then went back to slicing peaches. "How'd you sleep?" "Like the tide, coming and going." I forced a smile. "Claire's in the shower." Lily's knife paused for a heartbeat, just enough to register that the subject mattered, then kept moving. "We'll make a big breakfast. Maybe that'll anchor everyone." Claire drifted in a few minutes later, damp hair braided, phone already pocketed again like it lived closer to her pulse than I did. Lily handed her a bowl. "Sit. I made the yogurt the way you like." "Thanks," Claire said, and kissed her sister's cheek. When I tried to brush my fingers along her wrist as I passed, just a touch, nothing heavy, she pulled back to reach for a napkin, the motion so casual it might have been unintentional if it hadn't been the 1,000th time. We ate, made the right noises about how sweet the peaches were. When I mentioned going into town to pick up fresh bread, Claire said she had some emails to finish. "You go? Grab whatever. I'm not picky," she added, and somehow it landed like a judgment. I walked the 2 blocks to the market because the air felt better outside my mouth than inside it. By the time I returned, the sky had opened into a hard blue. The day promised clean heat and the kind of light that makes even ordinary moments look more valuable. I wondered how many of them I had let go dull. At noon, Lily set the table on the back deck. Bowls of olives, glistening tomatoes, torn basil, thick wedges of bread, a small mountain of shrimp that smelled like a dock at low tide. Claire arrived with sunglasses on and the expression of someone bracing for an exam she hadn't studied for. "It looks amazing," I told Lily, and meant it. "You didn't have to go all out." "I wanted to," she said. "Besides, food is the only diplomacy I trust." We ate with the sound of waves dealing their endless shuffle below us. Claire scrolled occasionally, thumb flicking while her other hand pinched shrimp tails. I offered her the lemon. She shook her head without looking. "So," Lily said, training her attention on me with an ease that felt like sunlight. "You still shooting on weekends? Those abandoned buildings with the dramatic shadows, right?" My fork stalled. No one had asked me about that in months. "I try," I said. "Work's been heavy. There's a mill near our place I want to capture before they turn it into condos. The way the windows throw light is, sorry, this is boring." "Not to me," she said, leaning forward, elbows on the table. "You always made those places look haunted in a beautiful way. Show me later? I want to see." Something loosened behind my ribs. "Yeah, I can pull up an album." "What about the darkroom you were going to build in the basement?" she added. "Did you ever?" "Please don't encourage that," Claire said lightly, finally looking at me. "He'll vanish for hours if you give him an excuse." It was meant to be teasing. I recognized the cadence. But the quip wore the same perfume as a cut that had learned to pass for humor. I smiled anyway. "I don't vanish. I just concentrate." Lily's knee nudged mine under the table. "Accident," I told myself, though it sent a small electrical question through me. "Concentration is a compliment to the world," she said. "It means you're still capable of caring." Claire lifted her glass and drained the last swallow of white wine. "Anyway," she said to no one in particular, "I might nap." I wanted to ask her to walk the shoreline with me later, to let the tide wet our ankles and the sun bully a few truths out of us. Instead, I said, "Sure. Rest is good." The cowardice tasted metallic. After lunch, Lily and I cleared plates. The kitchen window framed Claire as she disappeared up the stairs, her bare feet silent on the painted wood. I could have followed, laid a palm on her back, asked, gently, to be let in. I rinsed a bowl instead. "Can I ask you something without you taking it the wrong way?" Lily said as she dried. "Depends on the thing," I answered. She folded the towel, eyes on the cotton corners. Are you okay? Like really okay? Something about the way she said really, like she was willing to sit in the answer with me, made heat climb my throat. I don't know, I said. Some days feel like someone forgot to stock the shelves. You open the cabinet, and it's just air. Lily leaned a hip against the counter, watching me. I'm not trying to pry. I just notice things. I know you do. Her gaze didn't waver. For a second the room compressed to the span between us. The lemon rind on the cutting board, the faint damp stamp of her palm on the towel, the hum of the fridge. I noticed the tiny freckle at the edge of her lip, a detail I'd never cataloged before, and the thought arrived with a trespasser's stealth. She is beautiful in a way that notices back. I stepped away, opened the fridge, let the cold roll over my face. Want another sparkling water? Sure, she said, and took the can so our fingers didn't touch. It felt like kindness or restraint or both. The afternoon lengthened. Claire napped, or pretended to. I walked the beach alone for a while, then sat on the damp slope of sand and watched a pair of kids build a lopsided fort against the tide. The ocean came in anyway, gentle and relentless, and the kids shrieked as their walls melted. They laughed and built again. Back at the house, Lily was reading on the porch. She looked up, tuck of hair behind her ear, that quick bright look that says you're welcome here. How was it? Wet, I said. Predictably. She smiled. Some things are reliable. I wish the right ones were. Evening slid in with the soft drama of a dimmer switch. Claire emerged in a sundress, fresh gloss on her mouth, phone back in her hand like a talisman. When I reached for her waist as we passed in the hallway, she did not stiffen. She simply wasn't there anymore, already a step beyond, already answering something that wasn't me. Quiet can be peaceful. This quiet had edge. It felt like sleeping next to a blade. We settled into it anyway. 3 people in a beautiful house, pretending the breeze could do the talking for us. I told myself not to read meaning into the way Lily's laugh found me from across the room, or the way our eyes met when Claire looked away. I told myself to be good, to be patient, to remember that wanting and doing are different animals. But when the night finally pressed its cool mouth against the windows, and the house exhaled, it was hard not to picture a future where the cabinet wasn't empty, where conversation mattered again, where touch wasn't treated like a theft. Harder still not to notice that the first person in days who asked about my work had also been the first person whose voice I wanted close. And that somewhere under all the salt and sun, the word sex didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a language I could still speak, if someone wanted to listen. By mid-afternoon, the horizon looked close enough to lean on. The glare off the water made everything feel a little unreal, like the world had been ironed flat and left to cool. Lily suggested a walk before the heat softened into evening, and Claire, without looking up from her phone, said, "Sure," in the same tone you'd used to agree that rain existed. She slipped on sunglasses the size of small plates and headed down the boardwalk ahead of us, already texting, already gone. The sand took my weight like it was thinking about me. The tide had just turned, leaving a glossy ribbon where the water exhaled. Claire kept a quick, purposeful pace, steps sharp, shoulders forward, like she had someplace better to be than beside me. I matched it until I didn't. After 100 yards of silence, I let myself fall back to where Lily walked, barefoot, holding her sandals by the straps, toes carving small crescents in the wet sand. "Don't worry," she said, a smile resting just behind her voice. She only walks like that when she's trying not to feel anything. What does she feel when she walks normal? I asked. Everything. It's why she learned to walk fast. Lily angled a look at me, as if to measure the damage and decide whether to add compassion or mischief. You okay? As okay as a guy who keeps talking to the ocean so it will answer for his wife. The ocean is a terrible translator, she said, and for a few steps we just listened to the waves shouldering themselves to shore. A gull dropped a broken shell near our feet and regarded us with the judgmental calm of a shopkeeper. A gust kicked up. Lily's hair blew across her face, a dark veil that hid her eyes. Without thinking, I reached to tuck it back. My fingers found the soft place near her temple where skin thins and heat gathers. She didn't flinch. She didn't lean in either. She just stood very still while I smoothed the strand behind her ear, that small, electric second when touch feels like a sentence you haven't decided to say aloud. "Thanks," she murmured, and it felt like we had both crossed an invisible chalk line and then stepped back onto the safe side before anyone saw. Up ahead, Claire stopped to take a picture of the surf, angling herself so the wind worked her dress against her legs. She looked like the ad for a life where men are always just out of frame. She glanced over her shoulder at us, then resumed her march. "You two used to come here in the winter," Lily said. "I remember you saying the cold made the coffee taste honest." "We did," I said. "We used to do a lot of things because they tasted honest." We came to a section where the beach dipped steeply and the water rushed up farther than expected. Claire hopped lightly over the fringe of foam. I didn't. The waves slapped our shins with cold that shocked a laugh out of me. Lily shrieked, bright and delighted, and stumbled into me. For a heartbeat, our bodies aligned. The brief press of her hip to mine, the thump of her sandal against my calf, the fast rise of her breath. Her hand landed on my chest to steady herself. My reflex was as old as wanting. I covered her hand with mine. And then the next wave arrived, larger, a playful ambush that paid no mind to lines or vows. Water surged around our knees, and we both staggered back, her hand slipping from under mine as we caught our balance. By the time we stopped laughing, Claire was staring at us. Not furious, not even surprised, just appraising. Like a teacher observing a pair of students she already expected to sit too close. "You guys coming or setting up camp?" she called, tone neutral enough to pass inspection and sharp enough to cut. "We're coming," I said, and the words felt too loaded in my mouth. We resumed, the three of us strung along the shoreline like beads spaced a little too far apart. The sun slid lower. The light got warmer and more forgiving. I tried again with Claire, stepping up beside her, matching her brisk stride. "Beautiful day," I offered. She didn't slow. "Signal's garbage out here." I waited for a joke, something to soften it. None arrived. "Maybe that's the point," I said. "To be out of range. Some of us still have things to handle." She kept moving, and I was left holding a line that had nowhere to tie. When I fell back to Lily's pace again, I felt guilty, then angry at myself for feeling guilty about walking with someone who actually met my eyes when I spoke. The wind had dried the wet hem of Lily's shorts. A salt lace crusted the edges. She swung her sandals like pendulums, steady as a clock that didn't care what time it was. "You don't have to chase her," she said softly. "You're allowed to let someone catch up to you." That sounds nice in theory. It sounds like breathing in practice. We rounded a low jetty where kids were hunting crabs with plastic buckets. One look at their bright ferocity tugged a memory of Claire and me 10 summers ago, drunk on heat, hands everywhere, unable to walk this beach without stopping behind a dune to kiss like we were practicing for the word forever. The memory felt like contraband, something I'd smuggled across a border and forgotten to declare. "Do you ever miss who you were?" I asked Lily, surprising myself. "All the time," she said, not asking me to define the question. "But I miss who I could be more." Another posture of wind, another toss of her hair, and we were there again, the almost touch. I didn't reach this time. I kept my hands at my sides like someone reciting a pledge. Claire finally slowed near a cluster of driftwood bleached to bone. She faced the water, phone held chest high like a shield. I stood beside her, close enough to smell the sunscreen and a note of citrus. For a long minute we watched a set of waves line up, blue shoulders rolling in unison. I wanted to tell her I still wanted her. Wanted the sex that felt like language and the quiet that felt like trust. Wanted the ordinary intimacy of shared jokes and shared beds and sleepy morning confessions. I wanted to say, "I'm here, are you?" Instead, I said nothing, and the waves performed their miracle for free until they didn't. On the way back, clouds massed in a loose formation offshore, like a parade rehearsing patience. The wind freshened. The temperature dropped just enough to remind us that warmth is a privilege, not a guarantee. Claire's pace eased as if the edge had finally tired of itself. She walked between us for a few moments, the three of us aligned. It should have felt like family. It felt like a coin balanced on its edge, waiting for the smallest breath to decide its face. The boardwalk stairs creaked underfoot. At the top, Claire paused. "I'm going to call Mom," she said, and peeled away toward the porch, already dialing. She didn't look back. Lily and I stood a beat longer, dripping sand, the shy thunder of the ocean at our backs. "About earlier," I said, the apology prepared even though I wasn't sure what part of it I regretted. "She saved me." We were almost foolish, she said, voice low. Almost is sometimes a kind of mercy. And sometimes it's a kind of lie. Her mouth curved, sad, knowing. Let's see which one it is. We went inside to rinse the salt from our legs. The house smelled like lemons and something faintly floral from the laundry room. I heard Claire's laugh through the screen, bright and distant, and I imagined her telling a story that didn't include me. Lily brushed past in the hallway, her arm grazing mine, that whisper of skin saying more than the words we weren't brave enough to speak. I closed my eyes and took a breath that tasted like foam and the dangerous part of hope. The sound of waves crashing against the shore had a way of making the rest of the world disappear, but tonight, it just made the silence between us feel louder. After dinner, my wife excused herself without ceremony, her phone in one hand, wine glass in the other, claiming she was exhausted from the drive. She didn't even bother to ask if I was coming to bed. I stayed in the living room for a while, staring out at the sliver of moon reflected on the water. The old beach house creaked and sighed with the night breeze, but it was comforting in a way, solid wood and salt-stained windows that had seen decades of family summers. I heard footsteps behind me, lighter than my wife's, and when I turned, her sister was leaning against the doorway, 2 glasses of red wine in her hands. Couldn't sleep? She asked, her voice low, as if the ocean might eavesdrop. I shook my head. Guess I'm not tired yet. She crossed the room, her bare feet silent on the wood floor, and handed me one of the glasses. The dim light from the lamp behind her caught the faint sheen of her skin, sun-kissed from the day, and the curve of her smile was softer than usual. She sat on the porch steps, the boards groaning under our weight, and I followed. The night air was cool, laced with the briny scent of the sea. For a while, we just listened, the rhythmic hush of waves, the occasional distant call of a night bird. She swirled the wine in her glass, watching it like she was deciding whether to speak at all. You've been quiet since you got here, she said finally. I laughed without humor. Guess it's been a long week. Her gaze didn't move from the ocean. It's been longer than that, hasn't it? Something in her tone made me pause. She wasn't asking like someone fishing for gossip. She was saying it like she already knew. You too. You're not okay, are you? She asked. The knot in my chest tightened. She's been distant, I admitted. We used to talk about everything. Now it feels like she's not even here when she's in the same room. She turned then, her eyes locking on mine. You deserve more than silence. The words landed heavier than I expected, like they'd been waiting a long time to be spoken. There was no pity in her expression, just this raw, quiet sincerity. She held my gaze a second longer than was safe, and for that heartbeat, the space between us felt electric. I wanted to say something, anything, to break the charge, but my mouth stayed shut. She smiled faintly, drained the rest of her wine, and stood. I should get some sleep, she said, though her voice had that slight hitch, as if she was walking away from something she wasn't ready to leave. When she turned to go, her hair slipped over one shoulder, catching the light in a way that made my fingers twitch with the impulse to reach out. But I didn't. The door closed softly behind her, leaving me alone with the ocean and the taste of wine on my lips. I sat there a long time after she was gone, staring at the horizon, feeling the echo of her words in my chest. You deserve more than silence. And for the first time in months, I wondered if she might be right. The morning passed in that peculiar vacation rhythm, slow in movement, but quick in passing. Sunlight poured through the big kitchen windows, turning the air golden. Claire was already out on the deck with her coffee, scrolling on her phone like the ocean in front of her was just a stock photo. I busied myself rinsing dishes from breakfast, though it didn't take long. Lily moved in and out of the kitchen, humming some half-remembered song. She was barefoot again, hair pulled into a loose knot at the back of her head, a few strands falling free. Every time she passed, the faint scent of her shampoo cut through the smell of coffee and toast. Claire announced she was going to take a long shower before we went out for the afternoon. She disappeared upstairs, the sound of running water filling the space above us. That's when Lily came back into the kitchen, a dish towel in her hand, moving to stand right beside me as I wiped the counter. You missed a spot, she said, her voice warm and teasing. I glanced at her. You're worse than a health inspector. She grinned, then leaned in slightly, reaching past me to grab the sponge from the sink. Her hip brushed mine, light enough to claim as an accident, long enough to question if it was. She wiped at a non-existent smear on the counter, and when she set the sponge back, her hand rested on my lower back. Not a quick pat, not an incidental bump, just there. Warm, steady. It couldn't have been more than 2 seconds, but it felt longer. My breath hitched before I could stop it. When I looked at her, she was watching me with an expression that didn't quite fit into any category I'd used for her before. Playful, yes, but there was a flicker of something daring in her eyes. A kind of silent test. How far will you let this go? I opened my mouth to speak, though I had no idea what words I was going to use. She beat me to it. You always stand so still, she said softly. Makes it easy to sneak up on you. I smirked, trying for casual even as my pulse betrayed me. Maybe I just like letting people think they're getting away with something. Her smile deepened, but she didn't reply. Instead, she stepped back, wiping her hands on the towel, the heat of her touch leaving an almost physical absence against my skin. From upstairs, the shower shut off. A moment later, pipes groaned and water dripped somewhere unseen. Lily tossed the towel over her shoulder and reached for a glass in the cabinet. I'm going to make some lemonade. You want one? Yeah, I said too quickly. She poured the water, added ice, sliced lemons with precise, practiced movements. I found myself watching her hands, the curve of her fingers around the knife, the way her wrist flexed. When she handed me the glass, our fingers didn't touch, but her gaze lingered on mine for a heartbeat before she looked away. Claire came downstairs just then, hair damp and curling at the ends, scrolling through her phone again. She didn't notice the lemonade, or the tension that still hung faintly in the air. Ready to go into town? She asked, not looking up. Almost, I said, taking a long drink, the tartness jolting me back into myself. Lily was already rinsing the knife in the sink, her expression neutral now, as if the last 5 minutes had been imagined entirely. But I knew I hadn't imagined the warmth on my back, the pause that had felt like a held breath between us. When we left for town, I walked behind them both down the porch steps. Claire was talking about finding a boutique she liked last summer. Lily glanced back at me once, her eyes flicking downward for just an instant before she turned away again. That single glance was enough to remind me. Some touches linger long after they're gone, and some, once felt, are impossible to forget. The crickets were louder that night, their steady chorus cutting through the distant crash of waves. I stepped out onto the back porch with a beer in hand, mostly to get away from the stilted dinner conversation that had felt more like a business meeting than a meal with my wife. She'd spent most of it scrolling through her phone, nodding at me absently when I spoke, like a parent pretending to listen to a child's story. The air was cooler now, the salt carried heavier in the breeze. I leaned on the porch railing, watching the moonlight flicker across the surface of the water. I heard the sliding glass door open behind me, but I didn't turn right away. Mind if I join you? Her voice was soft, careful, almost like she was asking for permission to enter my thoughts. I nodded, glancing over as she stepped outside. She was barefoot, wearing loose linen pants and a thin sweater, her hair falling in dark waves over her shoulders. There was something about the way the light hit her that made my chest tighten, not the rapid, hungry squeeze of lust, but something quieter, more dangerous. She held 2 glasses of wine, offering me one. I took it without a word, feeling her fingers brush against mine. The touch lingered, barely a second too long, but enough for my mind to catalog it. We stood there in silence for a while, sipping and staring at the black expanse of ocean. Then, she broke it. You've been quiet lately, she said, her tone almost casual. I gave a short laugh. Guess I'm just matching the mood around here. Her lips curved, not a smile exactly, more like a recognition. She's distracted, she said. I snorted. That's one word for it. She turned toward me, her eyes locking on mine. You deserve more than silence. The words hit harder than I expected. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out right away. My mind was already turning them over, looking for hidden meanings, weighing the risk in asking what she meant. Instead, I said, that's not really your call to make. Her gaze didn't waver. Maybe not, but I see the way you look at her, and the way she doesn't look back. I see how you try, how you still try, and she doesn't even notice. I felt heat rise in my chest, not from anger, but from the rawness of having someone name what I'd been feeling for months. My instinct was to shut it down, to keep the boundaries neat and clear. But she was standing close enough now that I could smell her. Wine, salt, and something faintly sweet, like vanilla. Careful, I said quietly. She tilted her head, a faint smirk touching her lips. Careful of what? Of making me wonder why you care so much. That time, she did smile, but there was no innocence in it. Maybe I like noticing things she doesn't. Her eyes lingered on mine, then dropped briefly to my mouth before returning. The moment stretched, thick and tense. I could hear my own heartbeat over the surf. If I stepped closer, if I reached for her, I had no doubt she'd let me. But I also knew we'd cross a line that couldn't be walked back. She took a slow sip of wine, her gaze never leaving me. Then she set the glass on the railing and stepped back. "Good night," she said softly. I watched her walk inside, her bare feet making no sound on the wood. I didn't move for a long time after she was gone. The wine sat untouched in my hand, and the ocean kept on rolling, relentless and patient, like it knew something I didn't. The next day passed in a blur of forced normalcy. Claire suggested a late dinner in town, and we went, me, her, and Lily, like some odd tableau of family harmony. Conversation skimmed over safe topics, the fresh catch on the menu, the weather, the antique shops we passed. It was the kind of night where no one would guess there was anything brewing beneath the surface. But I felt it, the undercurrent, the way Lily's eyes found mine when Claire wasn't looking, the way my thoughts drifted back to the porch the night before, to the quiet weight of her words and the heat in her gaze. When we got back, Claire said she was tired and went upstairs without waiting for me. I watched her disappear down the hallway, the sound of her footsteps fading, then looked toward the back door. Lily was already there, sliding it open, the porch light painting her in gold. "I'm going for a walk," she said simply. I hesitated for all of 3 seconds before I followed. The air was cooler than the night before, the breeze tugging at my shirt, carrying the sharp tang of salt. The sand was cool beneath my feet, damp where the tide had recently pulled back. Lily walked beside me in silence at first, her steps measured, eyes on the dark horizon where the ocean met the sky. We didn't speak until we reached the edge of the surf. The moonlight turned the water into silver fire, each wave curling in on itself before dissolving into foam. She stopped, turned toward me, and for a moment we just stood there, the sound of the ocean filling the space between us. "I don't usually do this," she said softly. "Do what?" My voice was low, steady, though my pulse was anything but. "Go looking for trouble." I swallowed. "You think this is trouble?" Her mouth curved. "I think it could be." She stepped closer, and I felt the heat from her body, even with the cool wind around us. Her hand found mine, slowly, deliberately, and the contact was like a current running through me. I didn't pull away. Couldn't. We stood like that for a moment, her fingers laced with mine, our bodies not quite touching. Then she leaned in. I don't know who closed the final inch between us, maybe both of us, but the kiss happened before I could think. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't frantic. It was slow, deliberate, a careful unfolding of something that had been building since the moment we arrived at the beach house. Her lips were warm, soft, tasting faintly of wine and salt. My free hand found her waist, and she let out the faintest sound, a hitch of breath that sent heat straight through me. The world narrowed to the press of her mouth, the gentle slide of her fingers against my palm, the steady roar of the ocean just beyond us. I forgot where I was, forgot everything except that I didn't want this to stop. And then, just as suddenly, she pulled back. Her breathing was a little uneven, her eyes searching mine in the moonlight. "We can't," she said, though it didn't sound like a statement she believed. "I know." My voice was quiet, rough. We stood there another moment, both of us catching our breath, the taste of the kiss still between us. Then she let go of my hand and stepped back, turning toward the house. The walk back was silent, the kind of silence that hums with everything unspoken. At the porch, she glanced at me once, quick, almost shy, and then slipped inside without a word. I stayed out there, staring at the dark water, my lips still tingling. The kiss had been brief, restrained, but it had set something in motion, something that couldn't be undone. I told myself it wouldn't happen again, that the kiss by the shore was a mistake born from the quiet ache inside me and the intoxicating pull of someone finally seeing me. But the next day, my resolve felt like wet sand under a wave, washed away before I could even stand firm. My wife was in her usual rhythm, distant, half buried in her phone or texting someone while lounging on the deck. She barely looked up when I passed by. That invisible wall between us seemed thicker here, despite the openness of the ocean and sky. If anything, the vastness around us only made her absence feel bigger. Her sister, though, she noticed everything. I caught her glancing at me over breakfast, her eyes holding that unspoken acknowledgement of what had happened the night before. She didn't avoid me. She didn't seem ashamed. If anything, she looked like someone who knew exactly where this was heading and was already on her way there. The day dragged. We went into town for ice cream, the three of us, but my wife walked ahead, chatting on the phone while her sister and I trailed behind. She asked about my favorite music, about the bands I used to see live when I was younger, about things my wife hadn't brought up in years. Her laughter was easy, her attention warm. When our arms brushed, neither of us pulled away. By the time night fell, the air was thick with humidity and the faint scent of salt water carried through the open windows. My wife announced she was exhausted and went to bed early. I stayed up, claiming I wanted to watch the waves under the moonlight. I didn't have to wonder long. Her sister appeared in the doorway of the living room, barefoot, wearing an oversized t-shirt that barely grazed the tops of her thighs. "You're still up," she said softly. "Couldn't sleep." She stepped closer, her eyes locked on mine. Neither could I. I should have moved. I should have stood, walked past her, gone to bed alone. But when she sat beside me on the couch, her thigh pressed against mine, my chest felt tight in a way that had nothing to do with guilt and everything to do with wanting. "You've been quiet all day," she murmured. Trying not to think about last night, I admitted. She tilted her head, a faint, knowing smile on her lips. "I've been thinking about nothing else." Her hand found mine, fingers intertwining, warm and sure. My pulse thudded in my ears. I didn't resist when she leaned in, her breath brushing my cheek before her lips met mine again. This kiss was different, hungrier, more certain. The taste of her lingered, mingling with the faint tang of wine on her tongue. When she pulled back, she searched my face like she was reading every line, every hesitation. "Tell me to stop," she whispered. I didn't. Instead, I pulled her closer, and her body fit against mine like it had been made to be there. The heat between us was immediate and overwhelming. Her hands slid over my shoulders, down my back, and I could feel every inch of her through the thin cotton of that shirt. We ended up in my room without even talking about it, the sound of the ocean filling the spaces where words should have been. Her kiss deepened, her fingers tracing the line of my jaw, the back of my neck. When she pulled me down onto the bed with her, there was no hesitation left in me. The weight of her in my arms, the warmth of her skin under my hands. It was a dangerous, intoxicating contrast to the cold absence I'd been living with. Every sigh from her lips, every shift of her body beneath mine, pulled me further from the man I thought I was and deeper into the man I had become in her presence. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. The air was charged, the rhythm of our bodies sinking like the tide outside. It wasn't just sex. It was an unspoken affirmation, a reckless, breathless answer to the question I hadn't let myself ask. What if I let go? By the time the first thin light of dawn slipped through the curtains, she was curled against me, her breathing slow and steady. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my hand still resting on the curve of her hip. I knew I'd crossed a line there was no coming back from, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. The morning light was too bright. It cut through the thin curtains in sharp lines, landing across the bed and over her bare shoulder where she still slept, tangled in the sheets. My head felt heavy, not from lack of sleep, but from the weight of what I'd done. The air still smelled faintly of salt and her skin, a combination that made it impossible to convince myself last night had been some dream. I slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake her. Pulling on a pair of jeans, I glanced back once. She looked peaceful, one arm stretched across my pillow, her hair a dark spill over the linen. My stomach twisted. I grabbed my shirt from the floor and noticed her clothes draped carelessly over the chair in the corner. Her shorts, her tank top, even her underwear. Evidence. Evidence that, if seen by the wrong eyes, would shatter whatever fragile balance still existed in this house. The knock came before I could move them. Sharp. Impatient. I froze. "Yeah." My voice cracked slightly. The door opened before I got an answer. Claire stepped inside, already talking. "Do you know where?" She stopped. Her gaze flicked from me, half-dressed, to the pile of clothes on the chair. Her eyes landed on the bed behind me. I didn't have to turn to know what she saw. Her expression shifted fast. First confusion, then realization, then something raw and ugly that made my chest feel tight. Her skin went pale before flushing with anger, her hands curling into fists at her sides. What the hell is this? Her voice was sharp enough to cut. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Behind me, there was the rustle of sheets. Lily sat up slowly, the blanket clutched to her chest. She didn't speak, didn't move to cover more of herself, just met her sister's eyes with a calm that bordered on defiance. Claire's breath hitched, a sound like a choke, before she turned it into a bitter laugh. Wow. Just wow. Claire, I started, but she was already moving, backing toward the door. Don't, she snapped. Don't say a single word to me right now. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. The sound echoed in the room long after she was gone. I sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. Lily shifted behind me, her hand brushing lightly against my back. That could have gone worse, she said softly. I turned to stare at her. How? She didn't throw anything at you. It wasn't a joke I could laugh at. The house felt too small, too still. Through the window, the ocean kept rolling in, indifferent to the chaos inside these walls. My heart was still pounding, not just from the confrontation, but from the unshakable realization. There was no hiding now. No pretending. No walking this back. Claire knew. And whatever happened next, the truth was out in the open, where it would do the most damage. I didn't know if I was ready for the storm that was coming, but I knew it was already here. The living room felt smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the weight of the stairs, my wife on one side of the couch, her sister leaning casually against the armrest, and me standing in the middle like the defendant in some silent trial. Outside, the sound of the waves was faint but steady, like a clock ticking down the seconds until something broke. My wife's eyes were red but dry. I think she'd passed the crying stage and skipped straight to fury. Do you want to tell me what the hell I just walked in on? She said, her voice trembling in a way that had nothing to do with weakness. Her sister didn't flinch. In fact, she looked calm, almost smug. She crossed one leg over the other, the corner of her mouth twitching upward. You want me to tell her, she said to me. Or should I? I took a breath. There's nothing to dress up here. You've been pushing me away for months, and tonight you walked in on what that distance created. My wife shot up from the couch like she'd been burned. What that distance created? Are you seriously trying to put this on me? Her voice was rising now, the sound bouncing off the wood-paneled walls. Her sister's voice cut in, low and steady. He's not putting it on you. I am. You've been treating him like a ghost in his own marriage, and you know it. You don't want him, but you also don't want anyone else to. Stay out of this, my wife snapped, turning on her. The sister just shook her head. Too late for that. The air between them crackled, like I was watching two storms merge into something bigger and more dangerous. My wife's hands were balled into fists, but it wasn't anger that hit me hardest. It was the look behind it. Hurt, betrayal, and maybe, under all that, the faintest trace of guilt. You could have talked to me, she said to me, her voice softer now. You could have told me you were unhappy instead of. She glanced at her sister, her face twisting in disgust. This? I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the absurdity of that claim felt like a punchline to the last year of my life. Talk to you? I've been trying to talk to you. You've been glued to your phone, shutting down every attempt I've made to connect. The only person who's looked me in the eyes and actually seen me lately is standing right there. Her sister didn't move, but I could feel her eyes on me. You're pathetic, my wife said finally, the venom back in her tone. You couldn't get attention from your own wife, so you crawled to the nearest available skirt. That's rich, coming from you, her sister said, her voice suddenly sharp. Because if I remember correctly, you've been working late an awful lot for someone whose company doesn't even stay open past 6. My wife froze, and for the first time all evening, her mouth didn't have an immediate reply. The silence was deafening. I stepped back, feeling my pulse slow in the strange calm that followed. We're done, I said, and the words tasted final in my mouth. Not bitter, not sweet, just finished. Her face went blank, like she'd been expecting a fight, and I'd just stolen the opportunity from her. Fine, she said. Pack your things and get out. I nodded, but my voice stayed steady. No, I'm leaving, but you can keep the house. Keep the furniture. Keep all of it. I don't want any more ties to this than I already have. Her sister's gaze lingered on me as I turned for the hallway. No one said anything else. No one needed to. The confrontation was over, but the echoes of it would stay in that room long after I was gone. The air outside was colder than it had been all weekend, the kind of sharp morning breeze that carried the tang of salt and the promise of rain. I carried my bag down the porch steps slowly, the wood creaking under each step. The ocean was still roaring in the distance, its rhythm steady, indifferent. I thought walking out would feel like escape, freedom. But as I crossed the sandy path toward my car, there was a weight in my chest, a strange blend of grief and relief that made it hard to tell whether I was losing something or finally setting it down. The screen door slammed behind me. I didn't have to turn to know who it was. "You're really going?" her sister said. I set my bag on the hood of the car and looked at her. She was barefoot again, hair a little messy from sleep, wearing that same oversized sweater she'd had on the first night. There was no smirk now, no trace of the confident provocation that had been there before. "This isn't about starting something," I said, my voice low. "Not with you. This is about ending something that's been dead for a long time." She stepped closer, the sand shifting under her feet. "I know." I studied her face, wondering how much of what had happened between us had been impulse and how much had been calculated. Maybe it didn't matter. The truth was, she'd noticed me when I was invisible to my wife, and that attention had been enough to wake something in me I didn't realize had gone numb. "Last night wasn't nothing," she said. "You know that." "I do." For a long moment, we just stood there. The breeze tugged strands of hair across her face, and I thought of that walk on the beach, the kiss under the moonlight, the way her laugh had cut through the heavy silence of the house. But I also thought of the slammed door, the look in my wife's eyes, and the line I'd stepped over without hesitation. "This is the right thing," I said finally. "For me. For all of us." Her eyes softened, and she gave a small nod, though it looked like it cost her something. She reached up, her fingers brushing my jaw lightly, and then she leaned in. The kiss was quick, just a press of lips, warm and salty from the sea air, but there was a tenderness in it that hadn't been there before. "Then go live again," she whispered. I picked up my bag and opened the car door. She stepped back, folding her arms against the wind, watching as I slid into the driver's seat. For a second, I almost said something else, something about maybe seeing her again, but I stopped myself. Some things didn't need promises attached. The engine rumbled to life, the sound oddly loud in the quiet morning. I pulled away slowly, the tires crunching over the sand and gravel, the beach house shrinking in my rearview mirror. Out past the dunes, the sky was opening up, streaks of pale gold breaking through the low clouds. I felt the knot in my chest loosen, not gone, but lighter. Ahead, the road curved away from the water, leading somewhere I didn't know yet. And for the first time in months, maybe years, that uncertainty didn't scare me.